Hi, Sabine. Thank you so much for being with us today. How are you doing? How's everything?
I'm fantastic. I recently moved places actually.
Did
So
you?
this place that you see right behind me, it is like a place that I've just managed to settle into and I'm loving it so far.
Amazing. That is great. We've invited you here today so you can share your expertise and share your knowledge with everyone who's going to watch this and with me. I'm really excited to learn from you. To start off with, can you tell us a little bit about what it's like working at Canva?
Indeed. So I am an SEO engineer at Canva and I actually do front end. So what that basically means is I'm working on the things that you actually see on the web page rather than the servers that Canva would have like in some other remote location that you
Mm-hmm.
get the data from. And so what I basically do for work is that I work with SEO specialists
Mm-hmm.
to research and experiment and investigate like the results of said experiments on things that we can do to boost Canva's rankings on Google, and to take ownership of more keywords. Because SEO is sort of like a keyword based game
Mm-hmm.
where the more words that are linked to your property, the better. Um, but yeah, I mean, working for Canva is great. Like, we have a really, really great work environment, and I'm just really grateful. I think we'll probably talk about that a little more later.
Yeah, that is amazing. And you mentioned you are an SEO engineer, aren't you? So,
Indeed,
is there a difference between an SEO engineer and a general SEO specialist?
there is a great difference.
Mm-hmm.
So, as an engineer, while you sort of have some awareness of SEO, your primary goal isn't to actually do the main research into SEO.
Mm-hmm.
You're not the one who is going to be looking into which keywords are the best to focus on, which like new techniques we should be trying to implement and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Rather, you would work with SEO specialists and collaborate on figuring these things out together. So SEO specialists would actually be the ones who do what people usually think of as SEO, which
Mm-hmm.
is all that research, right?
Yeah.
And that information basically trickles down to engineers who are able to implement all of the programming side of things. So there's this thing about SEO where pretty much nothing can get done without engineers
Mm-hmm.
because you have to do a lot of things such as making sure the structure of a web page like matches like what is expected, and it's hard to change the structure of a web page without like an engineer.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes like you do things like trying to optimize the performance of a page, which is more of like an engineer's like domain. So yeah, like you can think of the SEO specialist as sort of like the eyes and like the mind of SEO, and like the engineers as like the hands and the legs that
Mm-hmm.
get the engine running.
Yeah, that's a really good analogy, actually. Really easy to understand and picture. Can you quickly run us through your background? So, how did you end up an SEO engineer at Canva?
Great question. So I didn't actually intend to become an SEO engineer like from the start.
Mm.
I was actually just your average 20-year-old just going into uni with a general understanding of the kind of field that I wanted to go into, which was really just any programming job. Like I've always been a real computer person. I
Mhm.
kind of spent a lot of time behind a computer growing up, and programming just seemed like the natural fit for me. Um, and I guess during the course of my degree, I found that I was really interested in web programming
Mhm.
because a lot of the applications we use these days are built upon web technologies.
Mhm.
Even a lot of desktop apps that you have are actually simply just a web browser wrapped inside a desktop app. So
Mhm.
like web technology really powers like most of what we do. I think it's just a really great way to actually release something that the public can use.
Mhm.
So that's what I sort of aimed for in my time at uni. And I eventually started working at a company called Displayer, which built a web app that was about data analytics. They kind of make like a dashboarding sort of app. And
Yeah.
it was sort of like Canva, but more geared towards like data, if that sort of explains it a bit. Eventually, I moved to Canva. And while I was there, our team eventually switched to specializing in SEO. And so I got to go along for that journey. And it's just been really, really insightful. And that's how I ended up here.
Amazing. And you're happy there, I assume.
I'm really happy here. It's
Amazing.
like I'm finally learning this big thing, which is like used to seem like a total mystery to me. It seemed like black magic, but not anymore.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, all of that sounds incredibly challenging. So if you could share, I mean, I know it's a very long list, but what are the notable challenges you face at work?
Notable challenges are things like Google itself being, or any search engine really, being a black box. Like they're trade secrets, you know, like McDonald's wouldn't release their secret recipe and Google wouldn't release the secret recipe for their algorithm, because then everyone's just going to abuse it.
Yeah.
So a lot of the work in SEO is actually trying to investigate and try to sort of poke and prod at this mysterious object and see what happens, right? Like so a lot of the work in SEO is just running experiments. Like, for example, you might experiment with what titles your search results on Google have. Like, so you might change like the grammar a little bit. You might like perform what we call like an A/B test, which is when a certain percentage of users get shown one thing and a certain percentage get shown something else. And you compare the data collected from each of those two groups. And then probably at some point, a specialist will look at that and go, yep, we're going for case A or we're going for case B. But really the process of trying to figure out what's even worth investigating in the first place, that's like a thing which is still kind of, I'm still kind of trying to wrap my head around that, because like it's not intuitive to me yet. But it's all real time, you know, like every change that you make, Google is kind of just like the Wild West, right? Like everyone's just out there, right? Like there's no brakes on this thing. So whatever you do, even if it's a small change, you might actually completely tank your SEO rankings overnight. And then you'll just be going like, what happened here? And then you'll realize that it was because of some experiment that you thought was a good change, but actually turned out it wasn't. And then you have to like quickly like roll that back. And it's just hard to really balance progressing things in SEO and taking risks, because like the risks could be pretty bad.
That is very true. I speak from experience as well. You mentioned A/B testing. That is very big in, I mean, all fields, especially digital marketing, especially SEO. Everyone knows what it means. But from your perspective, how truly effective do you think A/B testing is?
It's a really great question. I think that A/B testing is it's good because you have like you're able to compare the results of one group against another, like independent of other variables, right? I think like one of the great things about like scientific method is trying to like eliminate confounding variables. And so if you manage to get an A/B test to focus specifically on that thing, then yeah. But that's like a big if, because sometimes you might have other changes like that are happening concurrently, right? Because especially if it's like a bigger project, like while you're A/B testing one thing, someone else could be testing another, and like then it's kind of hard to interpret the results. I imagine. I'm not an SEO specialist, so please correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I completely agree. I mean, I think it's incredibly useful, but you know, there's this ongoing joke in SEO that every question you get asked, you say it depends, you know? So it really does depend on what you're doing, on the niche, on the situation, on the other variables. But I mean, all in all, it is, you can safely say it is quite useful, don't you think?
I would say so.
Yeah.
Definitely. Like at the end of the day, everything's a tool, and it really just does depend on how you use it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean that all these challenges that you face, do you feel like it's a very steady and positive learning curve, or do you feel like you could do things differently, or the information could be relayed differently?
I feel like it is a good learning curve,
Hmm.
especially because there are lots of resources available on the internet. Like Google has actually published a lot of different things, right? In fact, there's a whole website. I think it's called schema.org, which
Yeah.
literally just lists out all of the structures that Google and other search engines might expect. And as long as you implement those things one to one, there's no need to really reason about anything. You're literally just following a recipe. And I think that's like that makes it pretty manageable. I suppose the things which are less manageable is the things which are not as well documented. Fortunately for me, I am but an engineer, so I don't have to like figure those things out. I just do what has already been figured out. But I imagine that being a specialist, the process of trying to learn like what things like could and could not be useful, that's like kind of developing like an intuition which isn't already there from other things in your life. Maybe if you're a marketer, you might have some insight, but I feel like the introduction of an algorithm, like some automated like component to it, kind of would complicate the process of reasoning about things in a more human, intuitive manner. But that's just my guess.
Yeah, no, definitely agree with that. I mean, it, like you said, it is very much a black box, you know, and what you mentioned earlier about how an SEO engineer needs the specialist and vice versa. I think those are really words of wisdom, because in SEO, you need different people with different skills to really make it work properly. So following on from that, can you go a tiny bit more into what you do? So I know that you optimize the performance of pages for search engines. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So would you
So
like to tell us more?
I absolutely will.
Yay.
So the thing about Google is that Google is like a web crawler, right? That was what it was originally built as. It would basically travel through links on like pages, like, and render the pages and like click on whatever links that pages have, like that page has. And it would basically just be like kind of exploring the internet as if it were just some graph, right? And so one of the key components is how much time should the crawler spend on each page. Well, if it takes a really long time to render a page, you're going to basically be killing like the time that you've been allocated. And it's also not a good sign in general. Like Google probably doesn't want to be suggesting poorly optimized pages, because that's just a bad user experience. So they've actually come up with a couple of metrics called Core Web Vitals. And these things are basically designed to tackle all these issues, right? Like they measure things like how long it takes to first load the page, how long it takes for the page to respond to your inputs. And also there's this one really annoying thing where if you're loading a page and you're trying to click on something, some image might load on top of it, and then it'll push like everything down, and you end up clicking on the image instead, and it goes somewhere that you never intended to go, right? So that's called cumulative layout shift. And Google hates all of these free things. So the lower you can get, the better. But to be forgiving, they've actually set a threshold where as long as your page is like a certain, within a certain threshold, like it's considered good, and like they'll give it the top ranking for that. But it's really one of those things where it's a no-brainer to implement. because it's not that hard to handle all these things from an engineering side, but it's just a case of most people who are building their first website might never even know that this is a thing, right? So with SEO, it's really one of those cases where a lot of the time people don't know what they don't know. But yeah, like we also have other things that we do to optimize the performance of pages, such as server-side rendering, which is when on most websites you actually get served the ingredients to make a page, and your web browser would cook the page together using those ingredients. But in server-side rendering, what instead happens is that computing power, which usually your client would have to handle, is instead that job is instead being passed to the company's servers. So they'll actually completely generate the page on the server using up their own resources and then send the completed page to your browser. And you might be wondering, well, what's the benefit of that if it just increases costs for the company? Well, actually, it helps for Google, because that just means that Google doesn't have to spend that time like putting your page together. They can just get the whole finished cake and eat it. And it's great.
Yeah, I mean, Core Web Vitals are a pain for a lot of SEO specialists. We have our own tools to check how well our pages are performing. So I'm wondering, how do you guys check page speed on your end? Do you have any tools that you can share?
We usually use Google's own official dashboards to do stuff. So if you look up, I think, page speed insights, I think that's the official Google thing where you can enter any URL and it'll basically tell you like what it deems like the page's performance to be. And I think it does this on a rotating like 28 days or so to account for any like random ups and downs, right? To basically give you the best average.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what I would suggest using, primarily because if you would use anything else, you can't really guarantee that the number you're getting on your tool will be the same as what Google is getting. Because I'm sure that Google has their own ways of measuring things where even if you were to implement them in the way that they describe on a certain page, they might be hiding certain things. I don't know. No one knows.
Yeah, exactly. It depends, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So page speed is obviously an issue for Google. We don't know 100%, but we do know well enough that it is. What kind of factors influence page speed that you've noticed?
So factors that influence the core web vitals, or
Core web vitals.
So things such as having to load a lot of resources. So if you have like a lot of really heavy images to load, like that's gonna definitely increase the time it takes for your page to load. Like if you have like a whole bunch of like things which the page are essentially loading one by one, like that can create a possibility that you'll end up with cumulative layout shift because because the page will just keep on like expanding downwards, right? So like if you really have that problem, you could potentially look into setting placeholders for things just to reserve spaces so that even when they do load, they just go into the space which is already there. Like but yeah, I mean, there's other things like just having really bad JavaScript. Like if you have like terribly optimized code that like does a whole bunch of unnecessary things, that's gonna eat into like the time it takes to render your page. Even simply just not having server-side rendering can also make it take a bit longer to fetch your page.
Can you walk us through internal linking as well?
Absolutely. So every site has links. They could be to other pages, or they could be to other links within the site itself. So like if you go to any page on most websites, there could be a nav bar at the top where you probably have like a home link. You probably have like a link to a whole bunch of other sections of the site, maybe the forums, maybe like the blog, maybe, I don't know, whatever it is. So these are what we call internal links. And Google would basically navigate for your page, building up like sort of like a map of like how your page is structured, kind of like in mathematical terms, like I guess you'd call it like a graph, right? Where there are nodes being the pages and edges being like the links between pages. And this is what we mean by internal linking, right? A poorly connected page will be very mysterious to Google. Like they'll see like maybe disjoint parts of the site which are unreachable from other places. Like and they'll basically consider that part of the site not that important, right? Or if the page is just, if the site is just not well linked at all, like Google doesn't like that, right? Google wants information to be easily found in your site, and so do most users, really. So it's really important to have websites where everything has enough links to be able to get to the important content when you need it. And not only that, the links have to be correctly prioritized. So for example, you might not want to have like a link to some really obscure help article like on the front page of your site, because that's like not the right priority, right? You probably want to have the front page of your site linked to the main app, maybe a link to like a few articles discussing the features and stuff. Like, you know, you wouldn't want to have bad priorities. And so one of the good ways to come up with like good internal linking is to not clutter your site with a lot of links, because like Google also doesn't like that. It's about picking like what you think is most important for each page. And if there are a bunch of related pages, consider maybe creating a hub page for those pages. So for example, on Canva, we have like hub pages for all of our templates, right? Like you might go to templates, which itself is a hub page, and in there could be like a notebooks page, which has a whole bunch of sub templates within it, right? So by categorizing things, you actually create a really good structure. And another good thing to do for Google is to also create sitemaps for your site. And sitemaps are like essentially a text file, which shows what the structure of links are in your site. Like it shows what pages have what links, and that helps Google to interpret things a bit better as well. So yeah, I mean, you could probably ask an SEO specialist about this more than me, unfortunately.
Yeah,
that's all I know.
That is exactly what we need, really. I mean, as far as I know, there's sitemap.xml, which is what you are referring to now. And
indeed.
Yeah, and there's also an HTML sitemap, and those are on usually a tab on the home page, which is more targeted towards human users to find stuff easily on your page. Yeah.
But I definitely, as an engineer, do know that XML sitemaps are a thing which are used in a lot of sites.
Now that we're talking about XML sitemaps, a lot of specialists, I don't know if engineers forget this as well, but where there's a necessity to update an XML sitemap manually, they forget to do so. So can you tell us all how important it is to update your XML sitemaps?
Yeah, like if you don't update your sitemaps, then it's not going to be congruent with whatever the live site is actually showing. Like, because engineers will, or anyone really working on the site, will often change like what pages are there, like what pages link to other pages. Like especially if a lot of your content is dynamically generated, like that even exaggerates the problem even further. Fortunately, the process of updating things manually is only sometimes required, because there are plenty of tools available which can actually automatically analyze your site from the code. And and generate the sitemaps for you, right? They could even maybe do it from your live site, depending on the tool. So it's really one of those things where it doesn't take a lot of work, and there is a tangible benefit to doing so.
100% agree with that. So you're absolutely right that most CMS platforms, so WordPress, that update your sitemap, Magento, Wix, I think all of them update it as well. But it's always worth checking if it's all up to date. So for example, if you've got 404 error pages in your sitemap, Google will not like that very much. What has been notably insightful about your position at Canva?
I would liken my position to working on top of a gold mine, or working in like a library and getting to like read all the books for free. Because like I used to be just an average engineer who knew a little bit about the web, right? But now, like, I get to talk to SEO people, and it's like this entire like new like domain of knowledge has just been opened up to me, and it has been really, really insightful, because I used to think that SEO was one of those things I'd never learn in my lifetime, but suddenly I just got the golden ticket, right? It's like what was previously, I think there's a saying from like Marvel, from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where it's like any sufficiently advanced technology looks like magic. It turns out that like if magic is technology and technology can be studied, then SEO can be studied.
100%. These analogies are fantastic. I'm really enjoying them. How long have you been doing this for? Because it sounds like you know a lot about it already.
I've been at Canva for 7 months, and I've been doing SEO tasks for most of that time. But my team has only in the last few months started to really dive hard into SEO. So that's when I really started to learn more about it. Yeah, I'm kind of like a beginner at this point, I would say. It's very fascinating to me.
It is fascinating. And I think the best thing about it is that you never stop learning.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. And this is a question a bit out of the ordinary, but what do you think SEO people are like? So what do they have, a certain type of person? What are their qualities? What do you like about them?
SEO people, they are people who are very attuned, I think, attuned to like the trends of like what is kind of like what people are actually looking for, right? They're attuned to thinking about things like algorithms, which like are basically the cornerstone of what society or digital society is built upon these days, right? Like things aren't recommended just because people are interested in and engaging in that thing. They're recommended because of algorithms, which are designed by humans to follow certain heuristics. And I think that SEO people definitely understand that. And but they take it a step further than simply just acknowledging that, and they actually go about the gargantuan task of actually trying to figure out how to game the algorithm. And like and because everything is so complicated, right? Like the internet is like vast. It's like there's so many interconnected like things. To even try and like to try and understand all that, I think makes SEO people pretty analytical, pretty good at intuiting things, at least from what I've noticed from the people that I've talked to.
Let's see if the people who watch this can resonate with that as well. So there are lots of interesting things about SEO. We know that already. But if you had to pick a few top most interesting things about SEO, what would they be?
Its applications, its potential.
Mm.
So everything is built on SEO. Everything is about visibility on the internet. Everything is about, like, you can't really have a business if no one can find your business, right? You can't be a star if no one knows who you are. So I think that SEO has basically become essential for pretty much any endeavor in the modern age. People hardly look at phone books anymore. People hardly look at physical maps, right? When you want to find a good restaurant to eat, you're probably going to just go to Google Maps and search food. Like, so SEO has really become crucial in having that discovery element in today's world.
I mean, SEO is huge. I agree with everything you said. But for some reason, people still aren't as aware of SEO as I want them to be. And all SEO engineers, specialists want people to be. Why do you think that is? So why is SEO not as popular as other niches, for example?
I would say it's probably because it's one of those things that aren't seen. Human beings are very visual creatures. We really like what we can see. And SEO is something which is very theoretical. It's very much based on concepts. It's very much based on words and on things that are less tangible and able to be reasoned about in a way that is not reductionist. So I feel like the sort of like the entry barrier to SEO is what prevents a lot of people from even realizing that it's a thing. And for the people who realize that it's a thing, the fact that it's so it's such a vast field can make it intimidating for them to even want to start looking into it. That certainly was the case for me.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And the reason why I asked in the first place was because it was quite literally a year ago that I heard the word SEO or the term SEO for the first time. So I've always wondered if this is such a fantastic field to be in. I think so. I'm sure you think so as well. I don't know why people don't know more about it. And it's quite interesting to hear your thoughts about this as well. I guess in SEO, depends on what you do, but you kind of have to be both creative and analytical at the same time. So not many jobs have such requirements, you know. So if you are an SEO specialist doing social promotion as well as back end, like updating a sitemap, for example, you need some coding experience and some creativity as well. Do you agree with that?
I would agree, especially because the coding experience can help you develop an understanding of what's possible and develop more of an intuition about how algorithms and stuff get developed in the first place, right? And yeah, like the analytical aspect is certainly true, right? It's because for all the investigation that you do in SEO, it's kind of useless if you don't know how to interpret the results and how to compare like two different cases and results that you've obtained. Like analysis is really important because without it, you might see that something is significant and worth doing when in actuality could just be a statistical error.
Yeah,
so, I think it's actually really, really important.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. If you are an SEO specialist, what other fields can you go into after SEO, for example?
So you could do marketing. There's a lot of overlap, I would say, between SEO and marketing because from what I've gathered, a lot of SEO specialists actually started by being traditional marketers. And they later branched out into SEO because SEO is like more sort of niche. So you could kind of reverse that and unniche yourself and go back to traditional marketing.
Yeah.
But I think the more interesting path that I can see is like use what you essentially have like as superpowers, like use those superpowers to found a business. because like you will have like an ultimate head start where most people are struggling to get their business even known of in the first place. Like you know how to actually get people to find you on Google, right? You know what they're looking for. You have a competitive edge. You're not going to be like 10 pages down in the search results with like and scratching your head at like why no one's buying your product, right? I think it's like from talking to people in the startup scene, and I will say that I've actually at one point I was looking into making a startup myself. And so I interacted a lot with people in that space. And one of the things I always heard is that SEO is one of those skills which will absolutely tremendously help your business. In fact, there are some people who even go as far as to say that you need to have an SEO person in your founding team. Like, especially, like, not just if you're doing a physical business, but especially so if you're doing any kind of digital business or making an app. Like, it really is one of those things where, like, if you got it, like, you got to take advantage of it.
Exactly. And at the starting point, if you're developing a startup, you won't have to spend money on actual marketing for a while. So you can put your business on the map just with your SEO knowledge organically. So you don't have to pay for PPC or paid ads or LinkedIn ads. And as we all know, when you're just starting a business, you don't have all the money in the world to spend on this.
Absolutely.
So I definitely do agree with that. Yeah, so you said you wanted to start a business. Is that still in the books for the future?
Maybe in the far future. I decided to put it on hold, or I decided not to continue with it, rather, after I joined Canva. But it did open my eyes to a lot of things that I didn't think about before as an engineer. I think that if were I to find the right sort of mission, I would probably want to do something, but I may start with doing like a not-for-profit first, right? Unless I think that something is has like a lot of commercial value, like but it's really just waiting for the right idea to execute upon.
Yeah, it's always that we wait for something and we think about it and we kind of try to force it sometimes. But at one point, I feel like all good things come to those who wait, which is quite an overused quote. But it's kind of a when you know thing, you know, when it clicks, when that idea comes to you and you're like, ah, yes, this is what I'm going to do. And then
I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
Like 100%.
So now let's get back to your life at Canva. I'm super, super interested to hear what does your day look like?
So I usually wake up at 9, not because I like, or I mean, sorry, I wake up at like 8, not because I like waking up at 8, but rather because there's breakfast at 9 in the office, and like I am always gonna have breakfast like in the office when it's there. So I do that, and I usually start work around 10 or so, and after a bunch of coding, I'll probably go for lunch at 12. Lunches are amazing, by the way. Like lunches are single-handedly my reason for coming into the office every single day, besides breakfast. Like we really have like a great vibe team, and like they make the office a really great environment to be in. But yeah, like the afternoons are usually spent on meetings. We have all sorts of different things like stand-ups where we talk about our progress on things and any blockers for certain tasks that we're doing. We have retrospectives where we think about what went well, what didn't go well, what could be improved in the past couple of weeks. We have planning sessions where we plan like projects and all stuff like that. We even have coach one-to-ones. So every single person at Canva has a coach that is there to help you improve at pretty much all aspects of Canva life. Like they're there to support you on your journey, not just to becoming like the ultimate like engineer or whatever, but also to just giving you resources at Canva that are available, like encouraging you to join certain events and stuff. You know, like coaches are very helpful. I actually have a lot of gratitude and a lot of respect for my coach. He's helped me a lot.
That is
We have team catch-ups, coffee dates. Canva's got a real culture of coffee dates, actually. Random people just meeting each other in the office or in a cafe nearby, like, because it's such a big company. And we really try to get everyone to mingle as much as they can. Any other time until like 5 o'clock, I just spend coding. And 5 is when the day ends. There's typically a lot of clubs and a lot of after work events that we have. So again, we do have like a dedicated vibe team, but besides that, we also have like tons and tons of clubs. So it's really easy to find people who have similar interests to you at Canva and join all sorts of events. For me, it kind of felt like being at uni again. Like I was just like, hey, I'm at like a week once more trying to find the right societies to join. It was awesome. I'm actually part of the water club, where we just have reminders to drink water every day, and we call it the drink of champions, which I think it is. We also have the yelling club, where every single thing that you say has to be in caps lock, or it has to be yelled. Good for getting up that pent up energy. We also have badminton club, where they play badminton every Saturday. Self-explanatory. Lots of clubs, really.
That sounds incredible. So you said there's a vibe team. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so the vibe team is a dedicated team that is there to improve all aspects of the office life. So they're literally just creating the vibe, and to that extent, they do things like planning out lunches, planning out celebrations. Like we have a big celebration every season, which is every 3 months, where like it's like a whole party, right? Everyone's there eating like all sorts of food, like celebrating the launches and upcoming like events that will be happening in the next season. Like that's probably like my highlight of every season, really. Like going to like this party where like everyone is there and the energy is amazing. But they also do things like planning lunches and making the office a nice decorated place with art and plants and making sure that the toilet has enough supplies even. Like I've never seen a toilet, like toilets as well stocked as I have Canva. They have everything there. They've got like half a dozen rolls of toilet paper in each stall, so you never run out. They've got like tampons in case of emergencies. Like it's amazing.
I love that. That is incredible. That sounds like an awesome place to work. Yeah. So the last question, I mean, that all sounds absolutely fantastic. I think that only someone who works at Canva will be able to know this kind of stuff, especially all the clubs and how cool the toilets are. And I think that is amazing that a workplace makes it so fun for you guys and so enjoyable. And I mean, you can just see like the vibe that comes off you is that you're so happy at work, and that is so nice to see, because I feel like a lot of people in tech as well, they don't enjoy their work as much, but they're kind of just bearing with it, if that makes sense. I think that is a feeling that shouldn't exist, you know, that you're just
Absolutely.
Yeah. So do you work remotely at any point, or do you come into the office every day, or do you have a choice?
It's not always required that you come into the office. In fact, I think that you only need to come into the office like twice a season for like the really big events like season openers and stuff like that. Like generally, like Canva actually has a really good flexible work policy where you could work from home as often as you want. You could even like start your day earlier and end it later if you wanted to. You can take a break right in the middle of the day. You can like come into the office every single day if you want to, if you're someone who really likes lunch like I do. Like it's about what works for you, and what works for you works for Canva. That's the philosophy, really. But yeah, I actually wanted to briefly touch upon what you just mentioned, actually, about people being in jobs even though they don't really like them. Because I've actually suffered from burnout at points in my life too, and not really having a good time in life in general. But Canva has actually been really, really helpful for me. It's actually been life-changing because besides just creating a nice vibe at Canva, the Vibe team also does things like providing a lot of support to all employees, right? Like we actually have like a really great therapy program where you actually get to see like counselors and therapists and psychologists and everything. Like it's part of keeping people healthy. Like Canva really actually believes in mental health, and I think that's like something which a lot more companies should do, because I think it's just so important. There's also the fact that I lost my train of thought.
I've been getting that a lot as well. So if you think of it, just interrupt me and say it, okay? So our last closing remarks, our last question will be, what kind of tools do you use at work? Because that, I think that would be super interesting for everyone.
So we use Slack and Zoom to communicate, as I suspect a lot of people do.
Yeah.
But besides that, we use Jira to manage our tasks. So Jira is sort of like a tool which I think a lot of software engineering companies use, and it's like a way to create a whole bunch of tickets that need to be done and like assign them to people, and like to also track the progress of them, whether they're like to do, whether they're in progress, whether they're blocked, if they're in review, or if they're done, you know. Like Jira like also has like a lot of features designed around what they call agile methodologies. That's like a bit of an engineering term, but it's about like doing things in sprints, which are periods of about like 2 weeks, right? And trying to deliver like more frequently, rather than sort of building a lot of things up until like the final product is complete and then delivering that as one piece. Like Jira tries to split things up into more manageable chunks of like 2 weeks. So it really tries to keep things more reactive, more responsive, and more flexible. So yeah, we also use GitHub to manage our code. So when you make a change to the code in a project, it's often helpful to be able to track when the change was made, what exactly it changed, and be able to roll back that change if necessary, and to also be able to create different like branches off like the main program, and like eventually merge like the two separate branches of the development back into like one singular branch. Like these are tools which actually a lot of software companies use. Canva's not the only one. And I think it's for good reason. Like version control makes it very easy to develop features in parallel with other teams. And it also allows you to roll back things which weren't helpful, and to track the history of how things were done, which is always intriguing. For any more planning sort of tasks, we tend to use Google Docs to write up any design documents or any or anything really, like maybe just random notes while we're in the process of working something out. But if we're more like trying to publish a guide or documentation for some feature that has been completed so that other people can learn how to use that feature, we tend to use Confluence, which is another product by Atlassian. Jira was also made by Atlassian, but Confluence is this documentation sort of software, like where you can, or not documentation, it's like sort of like a platform for sharing like resources among teams. Like so that's where we tend to to put our resources.
Amazing. That sounds fantastic. All of this has been fantastic. And I think we've covered absolutely everything that we wanted to, which is great. Sabine, thank you so much again for being here with us and sharing your knowledge with everyone and with me. I feel like I've learned so much in the last 45 minutes. I really am grateful, firstly, that you are the first speaker for us. I think we've hit the ground running, and having you with us is just amazing. And I really mean that. And I hope that your work at Canva continues to go so well.
I am really excited to see where you go with this, Kira. Like, you're doing really great work here. I think that it's very important to educate people about SEO. I think that, like, I'm really keen to see what you come up with.
Thank you.